Ezekiel Dasho, and I'm continuing my portrait drawing series with this portrait of a young Indian woman, and we'll just get started. So, assuming the key features here for me are really her eyes, and I'm going to make those the focal point of the picture. The first thing I need to do is just establish where they are, how big they are, and so forth. And I'm going to do that by just gently sketching in the shape of the eyelashes and the rim of the eyelid. And then also I'm going to gently sketch in the shape of the outer part of the iris and sort of leave it there for now. The folds in the skin above her eyelid, and just using this gentle, soft touch so that we can sketch these things in and not have to commit to anything too early. And so what we're looking at here is kind of this big circle area, but rather than just go ahead and sketch it straight in there, I wanted to just start with the eye. So the axis that the eyes are placed on is about something like that. And then the distance from here to the start of the next eye, if you look at the picture, is maybe even a little longer than this distance here, from here to here. Or maybe it's about exactly that. So you could kind of swoop over to this area here. It's kind of hard to triangulate this one, but this will be good enough to get us continuing into the rest of the work. And just keeping in mind the shape of the whites of her eye here. And then we'll just get in the iris. We've got some bright spots, and it could be useful, especially with like these bright squares, to just block those out a little bit. If it put too many lights in the eyes, it can get sort of weird and busy when you're doing these quick sketches, but they can definitely be worth getting in if you're doing a more detailed study or getting into the hyperrealism and so forth. So, moving along here, we can now start her eyebrows. And get this shape here between her iris and the edge of her eye, get that triangle narrowed down to the right shape. All right, so here we have that, and shade in some of this eye socket here and the tone beneath her eyes. And then we'll go along to the nose. And her nose is a little on the long side, but not, not too long. And for now, we just want to sort of establish where it will be positioned. And so what I'm doing is just, I've got this nostril here that I've lined up with her iris, and it will, this line runs sort of parallel to this line that I made up by the eyes, and the nostril here ends about there, so I know that, something like that is what I'm looking at. And her nostrils are pretty delicate. And so as far as the tip of her nose goes, that's also pretty delicate and kind of easy to shade in. You can kind of see in this picture the angles that the tip of her nose is taking. And similarly on this side, just keeping it light. We'll go back in and make the adjustments and stuff later. So let's look at this very interesting teardrop shape there, and then that giving us the space where we can start the lips. And so for now, let's just sketch them in, and then we'll again make adjustments later. So a little thick. And definitely credit to the photographer and the model for getting a good pose that's good for looking at and drawing and all that stuff. It can be so difficult for people sometimes to just get out of the way of their stuff and let it be. So let's see. Full lips, and the lips maybe go even further than that than I have. And angle comes down a little bit more like that. And then we'll sketch them in a little bit. If you've ever looked at the anatomy of the lips, then you know that there's basically these two pads here, and then there are three on the top lip. So when you're shading, you can keep in mind the inner working of the shape, and rather than just looking at the flat surface of what you see, knowing what's inside will help with the shading the objects and understanding why the light is acting in a certain way on a certain shape. So the tones on the top lip are a little bit darker. And that's just a function of the lighting. And they usually are on the top lip. The lighting usually results in a top lip that's maybe a step or two darker than the bottom lip. So now that we've got her face, kind of some of the main features blocked in, I think we're in a good position to start with the hair, and hopefully this will come together pretty quickly. Some of this area here, we'll start over here, and it gets a little lost in the shadow there a little bit. So we don't want to make too many assumptions, but might need to, when it comes time to shading, we might need to make some inferences and draw some conclusions about what we see, even if we don't have all the information that we want or need. So with the hair, as usual, I'm just going to draw these big pieces of hair. And so like this would be a piece, and that would be a piece, and then we'll draw more after we bring her cheek line in. So we want to know where this cheek starts to angle, and we're right about here. And it angles pretty directly toward her lips, so like something like that for this angle of her cheek. And then her lip coming over here, you can just imagine this line coming over here, and that's sort of where this break is in her jawbone. And then let's see if she's got the corner of her lip here. You kind of imagine that going down to become her chin. And we'll draw some of this closer to her face as we bring in her hair a little bit, but for now that will work, I think. So then this shape here, making sure that there's enough hair there, and the part in her hair sort of makes this arc, and kind of getting that angle right will help establish the shape of her head. So she's got this part of her hair waving down and like that, and then see her eyebrows going like this. And so let's see her hair kind of stopping there. And her ear, her hair, holding back her hair a little bit. And let's look at this line here. And, as you would kind of expect, it goes up to the earlobe. So this curve starts right after her. If you draw this line here, parallel to the line that we use for her eyes. this curve starts right after that. And then her chin, kind of almost where her eyes start, her chin kind of starts again. So let's see, her neck, getting to the kind of easier spots. She's leaning in at an angle like that, and her hair comes down there. And as for the top of her head, I'm going to take this line of her hair here, the distance behind her ear, there, and then just extend it like that. Then we've got these shapes, big shapes, like this one, and something like that. And then, you know, something like that for like the single hair, something like that. And then we could draw a line basically down from her earring, and that's where her neck and clavicle and so just to finish up a couple of these details here with the ear, it can sometimes be a little time consuming to do them completely perfectly, but just get the shadows in the right shapes and the right places, and I'm going to very lightly draw in this earring. And see how far we need to bring down the rest of the hair before we fade off and run out of paper here. And so let's see, one of the areas that I want to fix up on my picture is the cheek here. I want to bring that in more in line with what I'm seeing in the picture, and that means for me slenderizing it. What I've done is it's a little too wide, and so with these bits of hair, I'm going to go ahead and just give them some shape and some color. The hair comes over here, and then, maybe, I don't know if those will pick up in the camera. It looks like it is a little bit. A little bit of the fabric there, just to kind of give it some angle and some okay, so if you look at the hair, there are some areas that are darker and some that are quite a bit lighter because of the shine. So for these darker spots, kind of go over them a couple times and then go over them again a little bit to get the directional element that we want. And now we'll start. I'm going to do lightly around here because I don't, not quite finished or solidified on how I want to adjust her jaw and cheekbone on that side, but I know that, I need to get some base levels of value laid onto the picture. So we'll just go ahead with that, and then we'll come back with the So for these quicker sketches, this part can be really fun because you get to, open it up a little bit with your shading, and the lines are so long and fluid, and it's kind of like just having a wide open field to run in a little bit. And still want to adjust this a little more. It's amazing how much you'll be able to adjust your image as you go when you're using this light technique of building things up. Sometimes I'm seriously just amazed because I'll start with a picture and I'll think to myself, oh, this is terrible, or, I got to throw this away and just start over. And I got to say, sometimes it just doesn't look like it's going to be any good until the end, and just keep with it, because if if you're patient and you have a light touch as you go, you might be able to make the corrections, or certain things that looked weird might not look weird once they're completed. I mean, when you start out in a lot of pictures, you've got this frame where it's just a couple of eyes and a clown nose, and that definitely looks kind of weird. And as you go, it starts to come together. And so similar with the hair, needing kind of a base layer to get started, her skin is going to need this too. And I like to try to find the planes that I'm looking at as much as possible. So, she's got this like really smooth, kind of radiant skin. And so in some place, but there are tonal variations from the shadows and from the little bounce back lights and things like that. So kind of as we go, just being sensitive to the underlying form, and then how the lighting's working on the form. Go ahead and get some of this eyelashes in here. And I need to extend my iris a little bit here so that it's just about touching the depending on how close you look at the picture, there's a subtle variation there of the blacks and the browns. The super dark black of her pupils and the edge of her iris, which is super dark brown. And it is a pretty high resolution photo, so if you go to the photo source, you will be able to see those distinctions. And I'm not going to, I don't want to get too crazy with the lights. Otherwise, it's just a recipe for a mess. At least when I'm using this kind of quick sketch technique. And let's add some of the, definitely want to retain some of the shine in the whites of the eyes, because there is quite a bit of it, especially in this eye, and help it retain that sort of liquid, wet look there. On this side, there's a little bit of that. There's some reflection from her hair and stuff. And then at the top, there's this reflection or shadow from her. Partially maybe shadow, partially maybe reflection. Look at this a little more closely, and her eyelashes are very fine and distinct when you look in at the original image. Pretty high resolution, so. I want this to be darker here. Darker there. And let's get on to this eye here. I'm going to go ahead and, take a little finer degree of control here with using the sharper edge of the pencil and changing up my grip a little bit so that I can deal with these finer points a little bit more. Definitely using a little cross-hatching too, just in the pupil to get that darker. And on the sides too, to get the, I want there to be some distinction. I don't want it to look like it's all black, but I also wanted to have that sort of dramatic darkness too. So let's do some of the eyelashes and shadows there. come in with some of the details under her eyes a little bit. And let's approach the nostrils now. Switching gears a little bit, but similar ballpark because we're talking about these finer shapes and quite a bit of darkness relative to the surrounding areas. These little super dark spots are sometimes the star of the show visually. Whether or not we really notice them or not, they have a huge impact on the piece. So let's look at her cheek a little more. I want to know, is this in the right spot? Is this angled correctly? It looks to me like it could use a little bit of adjustment on that side. Also, the hair behind her ear, it's nice that's black. That helps us as we go. And let's look at some of the shapes of the hair here. And just want to find a right angle here without having to turn my page. And then we've got this similar issue on this side as we did over here, where closer to the part of the hair there's this shine, and once we've got the base layer laid down, we can treat some of these other areas with some finer detail. So, for instance, up behind her ear, there's this darker spot, darker shadow made by the creases in how the hair's parting. And I'm seeing a relatively dark strip right about there. And let's see here. So we got the base layers in there, and that'll definitely help with the look of it. I'm going to keep going on the other side so that I have some continuity of aesthetics and just the general motion that I'm doing for this style. For this one, it's pretty similar to the other ones, but the hair is different, and so it's kind of calling for a little bit different style. eyebrows are pretty thick. And she does have a pretty, I'm just gonna acknowledge it, she does have a pretty pronounced unibrow, which I'm going to omit because I think it will make it a better picture. And not super interested in getting in the fine details of her eyebrows anyway. Just so long as the general shape is there, I'm good. And got this really shiny, wet looking gleam on her lip here. The top lips are a little more matte finish, not quite as glossy. Okay, so as we go, let's just get the shading done on the other parts of the face and see if we need to make any more adjustments, and then so I think, let's see, right now something that's kind of jumping out at me is I want this angle to be more like that. And her hair is just a gift that keeps on giving. It just enables you to, or it's enabling me to fix my mistakes as I go here. Sorry, I need to make so many corrections, but that's just the way it's going with this drawing. Let's see. And okay, back to the nose area. And the underside of the nostril is definitely a little darker, just due to the shadow. And it's a subtle amount of difference, but it's an important these little adjustments you can save for any time, but I tend to, when I see something, I tend to, like if I notice something that I really want to adjust, I do it so that I don't continue the drawing in a way that, I don't want it to be finalized. So like if I see, oh, this eyebrow really needs to have more darkness here, more arch here, when I notice that, I want to do that so that as I'm working on the other part of the drawing, I'm working on the corrected version. I'm not making adjustments to the uncorrected version. And that's just what I think my tendency is. I don't know, everybody finds their own path to their own way, but that just kind of works for me. So let's, speaking of areas that need some more darkness and depth here, there's these places in the hair where needs some more. It'll help with the contrast and just help with the whole thing. Not quite at that phase where I want to, add little highlights to it, but inside her, in her mouth, you see the shine in her teeth. I'm going to leave that like that and not color it in gray because it is pretty reflective. Work a little bit on refining her nose here. And then let's go through here and get some shading and stuff done in the rest of her face. So we're getting much closer to done. So it's just me personally. I tend to make my chins too long if I'm not being careful about it. So something I just need to watch out for. And these, definitely, like in my case here, I'm just to self-critique myself as I'm going, but my chin, my jaw, everything's a little out of whack. I think I'm just a little out of sorts today, and I think it might be affecting my art. And so anyway, I got this cheekbone when I first laid it in, it was just not correct, but so I'm making these adjustments and working on correcting it as I go, and it's making quite a difference. And the subtle, I guess what I wanted to point out was the very subtle adjustments can have wildly big impacts on the rest of the piece. And it's almost a little bit like that idea of the butterfly effect, where like a very small, like a butterfly flapping its wings on the other side of the world can have a big impact on the world on the, thousands and thousands of miles away. But to bring it back to the drawing I'm working on here, it's just those little tiny variations in the chin and the jaw, just bringing them in line with what I see, but also with the anatomy of the face too. And that's just a long-winded way of saying little differences can make big. It's the little differences. It can make all the difference. So I want to darken up this eyelash area here too for similar reasons. And just bring them in line with what we're seeing in the picture. Okay, so this chin, you can almost just make a circle and treat it like that, and that will help you establish the lighting and the angles of the planes. So let's approach this area here. Get the cheekbones, and those are casting the shadow here. Then sort of the jaw, the flesh of the cheeks, kind of creating a subtle shape here, which gives a little bit of extra tonality to that. And see from her ear almost to under her cheek is this cheekbone here, and it's maybe just a little bit of the hint of a cheekbone. And that gets you across to this shape here. And now, I'm going to do a little bit of the shading on the face here. Right now it looks a little bit like she's got a beard, and don't want that. One way to help with that will be to shade in the neck and get in the hair here. I don't want to push down too hard here. If at all possible, I just want to use cross-hatching to get the extra tone in, but this paper is designed for quick sketching, and it's not really going to, without pressing in super hard, it's only going to take so much. But if I press in, there are certain points where if I press in, I can get a pretty dark black, like over here. And so like this area here in her hair. And it looks like I got this crease above her eyebrow too far away from her eye. And that's okay. I'm not going to go in and try to move that all over the place. It's just to, you can beef up the eyebrow a little bit and shade it in a little bit to bring it in, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. Let's get the eyebrow a little darker here. And get some of these shadows in a little more. So let's see here. See these areas like right under her lips. Parts of them are, these little shapes are important to getting the feel that we want. And I'm looking at the whites of her eyes now and thinking this one needs to be a tone a little darker so that, it fits in with this shadow region that it's inhabiting. And so, yeah, we're getting into that finishing touch stage. And, there's so many different ways that you could treat the hair here. And I think I'm just going to do it like this and recommend that you do what feels right and looks right to you. There's definitely not, I think there's ever really a right or wrong way to do your picture. It's just kind of what is good for when we're studying. I mean, it's within reason, right? There are places where you can put a nose and places where a nose is not on a person. And, it's totally cool to play around with those limits and boundaries and stuff, but when we're studying, I mean, it's just kind of a matter of drawing what, just trying to keep close to reality. That's why I'm kind of in favor of just, studying from life rather than, drawing cartoons of life. But, so that's something like hair. It's so abstract almost by nature. Maybe give the hint of some of these hair directional lines like behind the others, and got this really nice soft pencil we can go in. Go and soften up some of the shadows and for this area here, just make sure we've got the ear the right size and shape, and then we'll gently just shade it in. I don't really want to put too much detail and attention into it. Otherwise it'll start to, if it's too crisp and clear and everything's super well defined, it will start to pull some focus away from the eyes. And I want the focus to be on the eyes. So still continuing on with some of these adjustments. So her hair goes here, and there's this like fine shadow line here. I want to keep that so that it suggests her neck. Correctly. So these areas here. Well, we're getting into that final stretch, I think. And as I go, I'm already starting to self-critique, and there are things that I like about it and things that I think I would do differently next time. And let's see if we can just give these areas of hair and stuff some additional fluidity, and just retain that directional value that they have. And then let's see, her garment here could be a little bit filled in. And let's just quickly look at this earring. It's got this shadow on the one side, and skin's a little lighter on the other. And just doing some of these shadow lines on the edges can help it pop a little bit, which it does in the picture, so and there's even a little one there. So, not pulling too much focus from that, but so we've got these areas here where a little bit of darkness will go a very long way to conveying the sense of like hair. And if you've been drawing with me and you stayed with me till the end, thanks for being here. And you've reached the part of the drawing where we add these little bits that I think really help set it up and set it off. And one side of the pencil is very sharp right now, so what I'm doing is looking for spots in the hair where I can use that sharp edge to make very sharp little angular elements in the hair. And then if it gets too dull, I just go and shade like another part close by. So like for this area, going and shading that, and maybe getting up here and shading some of this area too. And see if we need to make any adjustments here. And there we go. So I don't want to forget this little wisp of hair here either. And there are these little sort of like edges, triangular shapes behind her ear too, or shadows behind her ear. And so more quickly even some of these shadows out a little bit. It's almost a sound wave looking pattern here. And again over here. You could really get into the triangles and things like that up here. And I think we're going to call it a picture here. Let's see, maybe a little bit more variation over here, but to where on the forehead here where it could use a little maybe variation as well. Oh, it's hard to put it down. It's hard to put it down and hard to end the video, even though I'm just doing these little touch-ups and things like that. That's a good one too. Good one to finish up. And let's see, so right now I think the only area that I've left really white in terms of the face is this little bit on the tip of her nose, and I don't want to leave it absolutely white for the most part. There's a little bit of shine here that I want to maybe leave absolutely white. But yeah, I think that'll do for the and she's, if you wanted to, you could, there's the odd freckle here and there, and getting some of those freckles in could help with the sort of character and uniqueness of the drawing. But it's just a personal preference thing to see how far you want to go. And So let's see if there's anything else I want to quick change before I'm done. And I think all that I really want to change is kind of getting some extra shading on these parts so that it doesn't look like they're all headed in the same direction all the time. Basically softening the cheekbone area. All right. Thanks for being with me for this drawing, and I hope to see you next time. And don't forget to share this with people if you know anybody who likes to draw, and definitely go ahead and like and subscribe and all that good stuff. It means a lot to me, helps out my channel, helps my channel grow and find more people that can benefit maybe from or even just, be entertained by it, whatever. But yeah, I hope this was a good drawing for you. And now I'm gonna just use the long strokes to even up some of this. And maybe even move this in a little bit. And man, it's just don't want to finish this picture. And maybe go ahead and use the sort of long stroke on some of these areas on the hair here. All right. Thanks for being with me. This is Ezekiel Dasho, and I hope to see you next time.